On episode 12 of Luke Who's Talking, I'm going to talk about Duckworth-Lewis speaking at a conference and yearns. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Luke Who's Talking podcast with me, Luke. How you doing out there? I hope you're doing well. Now, let's talk about some cricket. Now, a cricketing term or a cricketing thing. It's called Duckworth-Lewis. Now, what Duckworth-Lewis is a calculation. It's a calculation. Nobody really understands how it works. And what the calculation does is determine what the situation of the game is when it comes to limited overs cricket. So if you're playing a 20-20 game or a one-day game, which is 50 overs a side, if it rains, Duckworth-Lewis comes into play to determine how many runs the batting side needs to get, or the chasing side needs to get in order to win the game. So let's say my team bats first, we get 100 runs in our 50 overs or whatever, and it starts to rain and the overs are halved, so there's 25 left. And depending on how many wickets the chasing team has, depending on what their current run rate is, if they've already started batting, all that jazz gets taken into account, and the end target is recalculated to determine how many runs they need to get in order to win the game under the Duckworth-Lewis method. It's very complicated. As I say, I have no idea how it actually works. However, it's not as simple as saying, well, the overs have been halved for the batting side, for the chasing side, they need to get half the runs. It doesn't work like that whatsoever. And so you can be advantaged by Duckworth-Lewis, or you can be really screwed over by Duckworth-Lewis. And I'm going to talk about an example of being screwed over by Duckworth-Lewis. I'm going to say being screwed over by Duckworth-Lewis. That happened the other night. Now, Australia and India were playing a game. They were playing a 20-20 game, so it's 20 overs per side. So Australia batted first, and rain shortened their innings. So instead of getting their full 20 overs, they only managed to bat 17. And as a result, they got 154 runs off of their 17 overs. Okay? Now, India had the same amount of overs to bat, 17. So you would think it would be sensible for them to have to chase down 155 runs to win the game. However, because Duckworth-Lewis came into play, that didn't happen. Now, this is why I say Duckworth-Lewis is ridiculous and can be very confusing, is the Indians had to get, off of 17 overs, to win the game, 174 runs. So they had to get 20 more runs, even though they were batting the same amount of overs. Yep. Very confusing. Very confusing. So India managed to get 169 runs off of their 17 overs. They needed to get 174, so they lost by about 5 runs. So, they lost, on the Duckworth-Lewis, they didn't get the Duckworth-Lewis target. But, they lost the game, even though they did score, practically, they did score more runs than what the Australians got in their innings. So this is why people get confused, I think, when you try and explain the intricate parts of cricket to them. I guess Duckworth-Lewis isn't really a common thing. It doesn't get rolled out every game, but it can be very confusing. The calculation is obviously very complex, and you can be advantaged by it, but in this situation, the Indians were not advantaged by it, having to score 20 more runs off of the same amount of overs. And, even though they didn't get the Duckworth-Lewis target of 174, they got 169, they still scored more runs than what Australia scored in their innings, but they lost the game. Yeah, that's Duckworth-Lewis for you. Very confusing and very complicated. Now, here's a question. Does anything like that happen in baseball? If there's a game shortened by rain, what happens there? Does anything like that happen in baseball or not? They don't have Duckworth-Lewis in Test cricket because they play for 5 days. Each team bats twice, so it'll just be a draw or in that situation. Whereas one-day cricket or limited overs cricket, that doesn't happen to have Duckworth-Lewis, so there's a result or some sort of result. So unless it's rained out completely, there's a garbage truck going past. I don't know if you can hear it. If you can, I apologise. But is there any sort of situation or calculation that comes into play in any other sports that you can think of out there, listener? Please tweet me or send me an email. But that's Duckworth-Lewis. Conferences. Now, have you ever spoken at a conference? I was at a conference and I went and co-presented some stuff at a conference with some people on Tuesday. So Tuesday just gone. Hopefully you'll be listening to this episode on Friday. I'm recording this episode on Wednesday, so it would have been yesterday for me, but it was on Tuesday. Now, I was there talking about young adults living with diabetes, and it's aptly it's a consumer group, not a council. The nurse makes a big deal out of that. She goes, it's a consumer group, we're not a council. But it's aptly called YADS. That's the abbreviation. So it's young adults living with diabetes. So it was myself and another YADS member there with our the person who has organised and has gotten the program off the ground. So we were there talking to some people about how the consumer group has helped us, talking about how it's been good to meet and listen to what other people, younger people, have to say about diabetes, dealing with, and I suppose just dealing with it in your, late teens, early 20s when you're getting, I suppose, figuring out what you want to do with your life and that sort of stuff. Now, in the council, not the council, the conference was Innovation at Work. So it was Excellence in Nursing and Midwifery Practices, a conference showcasing innovative patient-centered nursing and midwifery practices across the state. So it was interesting. There was some people there talking about some programs or something they had implemented in intensive care, and it was interesting because they said that they talked to one consumer. It was, I think, somebody who was in intensive care for about 3 weeks. They talked to this particular person's partner, and that was it. So my nurse made the comment that, or made the point that, is that really a consumer reference when you've only talked to one person? Like, do you need to be talking to more people rather than just a person? Is that really a consumer reference, one person sort of thing? See, in part of my group, I think there's about 7 or 8 of us, so there's a bit more of a spread, and we all have various different experiences. So somebody, I think, in the group was diagnosed when they were about 7, so quite young. So they have a different experience to me, for example, where I was diagnosed when I was about 18 or 19. So they've been living it for twice as long, really, than me. But so we were at this conference, had the slides going. It was quite interesting, and people asked some questions, whatever else. So it was interesting to go and be able to just talk about how important consumer referencing is, asking questions, and in the consumer's shoes, being listened to by doctors, nurses, whoever, who will take your information and what you have to say on board. So that was an interesting experience, going and talking at a conference. Right, let's talk about, yearns. You're having feelings, I suppose, and emotions about an individual, and expressing that, and then how they're going to take it. Because I'm in a situation where I like a girl, and I would like to tell her that, And I'd like to express that and say, if you want to go out, that's cool. If you don't want to, that's fine. I can't make you if you don't want to. But I'm toying with, how do I do that? Do I just point blank say, do I say, I want to tell you something, I want to talk to you about something. If you feel really uncomfortable, I'm sorry about that. But here's the situation. Here it is. Or do you be a bit more coy and suss things out before you, I suppose, dive in a bit? How do you do it? And it's a interesting, and I think it's a tricky situation. Maybe I'm making it more of a thing than what it really is, because I'm not really somebody who has a lot of experience in this area. So yeah, I don't know, how do you go about it? Do you say, do you do this? I don't know. It's very tricky, and you might ask somebody for some advice, and somebody will say, just do it. Other people might say, be a bit more coy, and that sort of situation. So it's very interesting, and I don't know. And then I have some feelings sometimes that maybe this person might not be interested. I'm probably not the type of guy, and all these things. You get a lot of various thoughts and feelings go through your head. I think I've made a decision on how I'm going to go about it, but we'll see what happens. I would say I'm probably a quite faint-hearted type of person, so we'll see how it goes. I think in the future, in future episodes, there will be, hopefully, I suppose, a bit of a review or update on what exactly has happened. But I suppose I'll end that on, I'll just say, I guess, a faint heart never won a fair lady. I'll say that and leave you with that. Well, that is it, everybody, for this episode of Luke Who's Talking. Don't forget, you can tweet us, L_Who's Talking, on Twitter. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Yeah, and you can also email me, lukewho'stalkingpod@gmail.com. And, on the Facebooks as well. I'll put some, links or something in the description. And, I've got some stuff. Oh, the podcast is now on TuneIn as well, which is excellent. So hop on TuneIn. We're on there. iHeartRadio, I don't know what they're doing. They haven't gotten back to me to say that we are or not on their platform. So, come on, iHeartRadio. Throw us a bone. Yes, anyway, I'll catch you next time. And also, I forgot to mention in that last little segment, something to just throw out there is also, I have a love curse. That might be a story for a future episode, but I do have a love curse, as dubbed by a friend of mine. And according to them, the only way to break said love curse is to have an act of true love. It's a Disney-style love curse, apparently. But I'll leave you with that, and I'll catch you next time.